Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Bookspin. Recently I've been reading a few novels and short stories on the theme of immortality. Always a fascinating concept, I think. There's so much potential for creative and ambitious and thought-provoking storytelling with this idea. So I've put together a list of 5 novels and 3 short stories about immortality and eternal life, all of which I thought were interesting and unique in their own way. Most of these I read quite recently, but some of them I read a few years ago or they were rereads. And they're mostly within the science fiction genre. However, many of these do spill into other genres. So for example, we've got elements of dark fantasy, gothic romance, existential horror, philosophical fiction and historical fiction, all in this list. I'm going to go through these in chronological order of publication. And the first story I'd like to talk about is called The Mortal Immortal, which is a short story by Mary Shelley. It's the oldest one on this list. Mary Shelley is, of course, most famous for writing Frankenstein. The Mortal Immortal takes the form of a confessional narrative which contains many of the tropes of classic Gothic literature. The protagonist is called Winzy, and he is a 323-year-old man who inadvertently became immortal in his youth after consuming a mysterious potion that he thought might cure him of love sickness and depression. So as a young man, he gets hired by the famous alchemist and scholar Cornelius Agrippa in the hopes of earning some money so that he can settle down and marry his childhood sweetheart, Phaedra. However, he falls into despair when he believes that she has found and favours another suitor. So he secretly takes a drink from a mysterious forbidden elixir that Cornelius has been working on, believing it might cure himself from his problems. But this drink has the effect of rejuvenating him and removing his depression. And in fact, he ends up marrying Phaedra. And for many years, it seems like everything is going great. But as the years go by, it becomes apparent that Winzy has in fact stopped aging. And this causes a lot of confusion and tension and strain on his relationship with his wife. As she gets older and enters middle age, he still retains the body of a 20-year-old boy. And this also causes some friction and suspicion in their community, prompting the couple to eventually move out and start a new life in France. So Winzy's immortality basically forces the couple to move out of society in a kind of exile, if you like. And on top of all these social costs of his condition, he can actually still feel the effects of aging taking its toll on his mind and body, despite his remarkable youthfulness in appearance and longevity. So his immortality ends up being a massive burden, a curse even, you could say. If immortality really is a superpower, he's not exactly selling it to you in this story. So that's The Mortal Immortal. And the first novel I'd like to talk about is this one, All Men Are Mortal, which also focuses on immortality as a tragic curse on the individual and his relationships with those he loves. So this makes quite a good pair reading with the first story. And this novel is arguably more literary fiction or philosophical fiction than sci-fi, but it does have some a fantastical element to the story. So the author is Simone de Beauvoir, who is, of course, famous for being a French existential philosopher and feminist writer. But she did also write a few novels. And the protagonist in this story is Fosca, who is a nobleman born in 13th century Italy. And the world he grows up in is the world of the city-states. And it's always politically unstable. Influential families are always vying for power and constantly at war with each other, which is typical of that period. The problem that, as he sees it, is there's no one party or leader that ever has the chance to permanently consolidate their power because of war, the constant warfare, because of mortality and death, i.e. the transience of existence, is the problem. So when he comes across a supposed immortality potion that will give him eternal life, he believes that he has found the ultimate solution for himself and his nation that will give him a decisive advantage over his rivals. He meets a beggar who's been condemned to death, who agrees to give him this potion in exchange for a pardon that will spare his life. So he drinks this potion and becomes immortal. And for the rest of the novel, we follow his life throughout the following centuries until the modern day, which in the context of the novel is 20th century. It turns out, though, that eternal life is not actually the panacea that he was hoping for, and the political success he strived for never really materializes. But what is more devastating is the effect that his condition has on his relationships with his family and the people he loves. It soon becomes clear that immortality is in fact a curse, and that he is condemned to watch everyone he ever loves or care for age and die. What's more, when these people themselves learn that he is immortal, they are horrified. So, for example, there is one particularly devastatingly emotional scene in which his wife discovers that he is immortal. And while Fosca insists that his condition changes nothing about their relationship and his love for her, she basically accuses him of betraying her. She gave herself to him completely in life and in death. But the way she sees it, he can only lend himself to her for a few short years. And one day, she'll just be a distant memory because of his eternal life, and he will no longer even remember her name. So the implication here is that immortals live on a totally different plane from everyone else. And so they're unable to form normal human relationships and truly experience love in the same way as mortals do. There's a lot more going on in the story, but it's very philosophical and thought-provoking, as you might expect from the writer. And it's well worth checking out if you're interested in philosophical or metaphysical fiction. And the next book that I'd like to talk about is This Immortal by Roger Zelazny, which is a science fiction novel which won the Hugo Award in 1966, which it shared with Dune. I love this novel. It's a little difficult to describe, but it's basically a post-apocalyptic travelogue and adventure story with an immortal protagonist called Conrad. So it's set in a future Earth that has been devastated by nuclear war, and the population has been drastically reduced. What remains of humanity have mostly emigrated to other planets, and our planet is now home to many bizarre and sometimes dangerously mutated life forms. What's more, Earth is now owned by a blue-skinned alien race called the Vegans, who have turned our planet into a tourist destination. Now, immortality isn't so much a central theme in this book as it is in the other books that I'm talking about, but it is an important component of Conrad's character. It becomes Conrad's task to act as a tour guide and protector for an influential vegan visitor to show him around the ruins of old Earth on a guided tour. This mission actually has a very important significance for Earth's future. Despite appearing to be a young man, Conrad is actually hundreds of years old and his true age is never revealed. He seems to be something of an enigma of special interest to the Vegans. He is essentially a mythic figure, almost godlike. The cause for his immortality is never actually explained. And his character is wonderfully written, and his dialogue often has a humorous edge to it. He seems to have a quite jaded and lackadaisical personality, which is presumably a symptom of having lived for so long. But at the same time, he is capable of being heroic and rising to the challenge when necessary. This is a very interesting novel. There's a lot of influence from Greek myth. It's well worth checking out. Give it a try. And the next one I'd like to mention is Why Call Him Back from Heaven by Clifford Simak. This is a wonderful and thought-provoking science fiction thriller set in a bizarre dystopian future in which people are routinely frozen after death in the belief that in the near future we will soon have the technology for resurrection and people will be able to live indefinitely. So this process of cryonic preservation is managed by a huge and all-powerful corporation called Forever Center. And in this world, everyone has implanted in their bodies a transmitter device. So at the moment of death, once the heart stops beating, a signal is broadcast to the nearest Forever Center team to collect the body to be preserved. We haven't actually achieved the technology for resurrection and eternal life just yet, but it's only a matter of time. At least that's what everyone believes. So people invest all of their wealth into their Forever Center Trust Fund so that the organization will be well prepared to look after their bodies after death, and enough interest will be accumulated for themselves to be well set up financially for their future after Resurrection Day. In order to save up as much money as possible, people end up giving up on all of the frivolities in this life to prepare themselves for eternity in the future. And thus, human civilization has become miserly and culturally stagnant as a result. We basically witness the death of the arts, entertainment, restaurants, and sports and so on. So we've got this great piece of dystopian world building. It's almost like a parody of traditional Puritan religious beliefs, sort of turned on their head. People have put totally blind faith in this technology and Forever Center as the whole purpose of their existence. And inside this world, we have an exciting mystery thriller storyline which comes into play, but this book is really worth reading just for its ideas and its world building alone. It's very entertaining and thought-provoking. I can highly recommend it. And the next novel is another sci-fi called 1,000,000 Tomorrows by Bob Shaw. This has a very outlandish view of the future, which is kind of bonkers but thoroughly entertaining. So in the 22nd century, a pharmaceutical is now widely available that once taken stops aging and essentially makes the user immortal without the need for any follow-up medication. So you just take one jab and you're done. And this process is called being tied off. However, there is a very significant trade-off for men. Being tied off can only be achieved at the expense of male sexuality. And so a lot of men put off having this treatment for as long as possible. So the immortality on offer here is actually an asexual existence. However, the protagonist, who's called Will, he is an accountant, and he is offered to be the guinea pig for a secretive new drug which will apparently confer immortality on him without any side effects, which sounds great, but it appears there is someone out there who is trying to hunt him down and kill him to obtain this new chemical. So we have another high-stakes mystery thriller, which is very entertaining, even if the characters feel a bit larger than life. And it's worth bearing in mind that immortality in this case does not mean being invincible, so murder is still a very present threat on his character's life. So again, like the last book, some really fascinating world building. And one aspect of the story which I liked here, there's a very creepy section of the book where we learn about the crime of immortalizing children. So you're only allowed to take the immortality drug as a consenting adult. But there are some cases of the drug being illegally administered to young children or even babies, and this has the effect of never allowing them to grow up. So they will always retain the physical and mental capacities of the age at the time of immortalization. So there's a very chilling little side story about a mother who is obsessed with her baby, and she has her baby immortalized in this way, so he never grows up, which I found very creepy. Anyway, it's little touches like this which I think make this novel a compelling read. And the last novel on this list for the next one is The Book of Skulls by Robert Silverberg. Another book which transcends genre, I think. It's marketed as science fiction, but honestly there's not a lot of science fiction in here. It feels more like a dark fantasy or even literary fiction. And in this story, we have a group of 4 male college students who go on a very strange journey together with immortality as the end goal. It's a very character-focused story, with each chapter switching perspective between the 4 of them. So one of the students has discovered a manuscript called The Book of Skulls, which was supposedly created by an ancient sect that goes back thousands of years. And this sect now survives in an obscure monastery in the desert of Arizona. Apparently, those who complete the initiation rite will be offered immortality. So the four friends set out on a road trip across America to uncover the monastery and complete this bizarre ritual. But it gets pretty dark, as one of the rules for undergoing this rite is that for every group of 4 who enter the ritual, 2 must die for the others to succeed. And this is a superbly written character study. Each of the 4 students are explored in depth, and we get a fascinating insight into their thoughts and their motivations and their backstory. There's a lot of introspection going on as we go into the mind of each character and his beliefs and motives for taking this journey, and what he hopes to achieve from immortality. None of the characters are particularly likable, and in fact they are often despicable even, but they are still compelling and fascinating to follow. It's a really captivating read. I've not read anything like it before, so it's well worth checking out. And now for something a bit more modern. The short story The Absolution Experiment by Bao Shu, originally published in Chinese. This can be found in Synopticon, which is a wonderful collection of Chinese science fiction edited and translated by Xueting Christine Ni. So this story has to do with a terrorist who has been imprisoned for mass murder. And he is offered the chance to be released from his lifelong jail sentence if he agrees to be the test subject for a revolutionary new drug which scientists are working on. The goal is to create a substance that can control cell division and fundamentally alter the human body to the point where immortality can be achieved. The problem for the researchers working on this is that these kind of experiments are extremely painful and terrifying and must be taken every day for months on end in order to make any progress, and basically they can't find anyone who is willing to do this. All of the other test subjects quit because they could no longer withstand the pain after a few days. So in their desperate search for test subjects, they turn to this terrorist for help. And when you're reading this, you're thinking, this man is so far beyond this pale of sympathy that he is the last person in the world you would want to immortalize. I won't say anything more than that because it's a very short story and I don't want to spoil it, but it's well worth checking out. It's a neat little story, very dark and disturbing, but also very thought-provoking. And finally, the last short story I'd like to mention is Mutability by Ray Naylor, who of course wrote The Mountain and the Sea. You can find this story on his website, raynaylor.net. So it's set in the future, around 300 or 400 years into the future. And in this world, people now live extremely long lives, and they appear to be immortal and living very comfortably, actually. However, memories no longer last as long as lifetimes. So there seems to be a cost to immortality. And the main character is called Sebastian, and he's been going to the same cafe every day for the past 60 years or so. And then one day he meets a new woman there called Sophia, and she recognizes him from an old photo that she's been carrying around. And she shows him this photo and they appear together in this photo as a happy couple wearing clothes that have been out of style for centuries. So these two people are essentially strangers to each other now, but apparently they had some intimate relationship sometime in the distant past that they can no longer remember. So the price for immortality in this story is long-term memory. And there seems to be an implication that as our memories degrade over the decades, our identities are radically transformed to the point where our previous selves, our previous existences are totally unrecognizable. So maybe there's not much to gain from eternal life if you're just going to forget it all anyway. So that's another interesting take on the whole immortality idea, I think. Anyway, that's it. Those are the 8 stories that I read. Thank you for watching. Have you read any of these stories? Are there any other immortality themed books or stories that you can recommend? Because there are a lot of them out there. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again soon for some more science fiction content.